Eli was always told that Thera was a forsaken place, a scrapyard of space where nothing lived and nothing should. But for him, it was a treasure trove, a quiet solace from the cacophony of the inhabited galaxies. The vast, barren landscape of the moon was littered with debris from forgotten conflicts and abandoned expeditions, making it a haven for scavengers like him. His ship, a rugged and reliable vessel he affectionately named the Nomad, rested on the edge of a crater, its engines cooling with faint hisses as the dust settled around it. Eli ventured out into the cold, his steps muffled against the soft regolith. His visor illuminated the ground ahead, casting light on the metallic carcasses of ancient machinery. As he moved methodically between the ruins, his scanner buzzed quietly on his arm, alerting him to a potential find, a rare alloy buried beneath a collapsed freighter. Eli was preparing to excavate when a faint glimmer caught his eye. It was unusual for anything on Thera to reflect light with such intensity. Curiosity piqued. He approached the anomaly, his tools momentarily forgotten. There, half buried in the moon dust, was what appeared to be a body. Eli knelt down, brushing away the dust with gentle sweeps. The figure was unmistakably alien, with delicate, translucent skin that shimmered under his touch. Her features were ethereal, almost serene, belying the harshness of her surroundings. What struck him most were her eyes, closed, yet flickering beneath the lids as if dreaming. Eli's medical training kicked in. He checked for signs of life, a habit from his days in the Galactic Emergency Corps, and to his surprise, he found a faint pulse. She was alive, just barely. The protocol for such situations was clear, but Eli hesitated. Reviving an alien, especially one this unique, could have unpredictable consequences. Yet, leaving her to die was not an option he could live with. He took a deep breath and sealed his lips over hers, initiating the revival kiss. The procedure was a mix of ancient human practice and advanced medical technology, an emergency measure that combined CPR with a direct bioneural energy transfer. As he breathed into her, his suit administered a cocktail of life-supporting nanites and stimulants. Moments later, her eyes fluttered open, glowing with an otherworldly light that filled the dark void of the moonlit night. She gasped, taking in her first breath as if born anew, and stared at Eli with deep, haunting eyes. "Who are you?" she whispered, her voice melodic yet weak. Eli took a step back, giving her space to sit up. "I'm Eli. I found you here. You were. I'm not exactly sure what happened to you, but you were close to death." She looked around, disoriented, her gaze settling on the stark horizon of Thera. "I don't remember how I got here. My name is Arya. That's all I can recall." Eli nodded, processing the gravity of the situation. Arya, an alien with no memory, found abandoned on a lifeless moon. It wasn't just unusual, it was unprecedented. He extended his hand, helping her to her feet. "Thera isn't safe. My ship is nearby. We can get you checked out there. See about finding where you belong." As they walked back to the Nomad, Eli couldn't shake the feeling that their fates had become inexplicably intertwined. Arya's presence on Thera was no accident. He was sure of it, but the larger question loomed in the back of his mind. Who had left her here, and why? Their journey back to the ship was silent, but for the crunch of their steps. Above them, the cosmos stretched out endlessly, a tapestry of stars watching silently. Whatever secrets Arya held, they were bound to be cosmic in scale. And as the moonscape receded behind them, Eli knew that the adventure was just beginning. Eli's ship, the Nomad, felt more alive than usual as Arya explored its cramped but cozy interior. She moved with a gentle grace, her translucent skin absorbing the dim light of the cabin, giving her an ethereal glow. Eli watched her curiously, noting how her presence seemed to change the very atmosphere of the room. "Where are we going?" Arya asked, her voice tinged with a mix of curiosity and concern. Her eyes, a deep shade of violet, reflected a universe of unspoken thoughts. "We need to get you to safety. Somewhere you can recover fully and maybe regain your memories, Eli replied, guiding her to a seat. I have a friend on the station at Halcyon. He's good with unusual situations. He can help us figure out what happened to you. Arya nodded, though her expression remained pensive. The ship hummed softly as Eli prepared for takeoff, the engines igniting with a gentle roar that signaled their departure from the desolate moon. As they ascended into the starlit sky, Eli monitored the ship's systems, ensuring their trajectory was set away from commonly patrolled routes. He knew that someone might be looking for Arya, and it wasn't going to be a friendly reunion when they found her. Suddenly, the ship's alarm blared, a shrill sound that cut through the calm. Proximity alert, the AI announced, its voice emotionless. Eli's eyes widened as he spun to the control panel, tapping rapidly at the screens. What's happening? Arya asked, her voice steady despite the growing tension. We've got company, Eli muttered, checking the radar. 3 small crafts appeared on the screen, moving fast towards them. Looks like drones. Not very friendly ones. Without hesitation, Eli maneuvered the Nomad into a defensive position, but he knew they were at a disadvantage. The drones were faster and likely armed. He glanced at Arya, who was watching the approaching crafts with an unreadable expression. As the first drone fired, Eli swerved the ship, barely dodging the energy blast. Hold on, he shouted. Arya braced herself against the seat, her eyes now closed, concentrating. Eli felt a strange energy pulsating through the ship. The air thickened and the hairs on his arms stood on end. He risked a glance at Arya and saw her hands glowing with a vibrant, pulsating light. The second drone fired, but this time, the blast seemed to slow down as it neared the ship, then veered off, missing them by inches. Eli looked in awe at Arya, who opened her eyes, her gaze intense and focused. I can control it, Arya said, her voice a whisper of awe and fear. The energy, I can bend it around us. Eli didn't have time to question it. He nodded, focusing on the controls. Do it again. As the third drone lined up its shot, Arya extended her hands, and a visible wave of energy rippled from her. The shot redirected, slamming back into the drone itself, which exploded in a silent burst of light and debris. Breathing heavily, Arya sank back into her seat, exhausted but unharmed. Eli took the Nomad into a steep climb, putting as much distance as possible between them and the remaining drones, which now hesitated in their pursuit. You saved us, Eli said, his voice filled with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. How did you do that? Arya shook her head, her breath still heavy. I don't know. It's like the knowledge was there, waiting for me to find it. As they sped away from the danger, Eli realized that Arya was no ordinary being. Her abilities could change everything, but as the stars stretched out before them, so too did the realization that their troubles were just beginning. Someone had sent those drones for Arya, and they would surely come again. But for now, they were safe, soaring through the cosmos, bound for Halcyon and the uncertain promise of answers. Eli guided the Nomad with a practiced hand, the ship slicing through the cold vacuum of space as they left the moon Thera's orbit. The silence after their escape from the drones lingered heavily, each of them lost in their thoughts. Arya sat quietly, her fingers tracing the contours of her seat, as if trying to ground herself after the display of her inexplicable powers. We're not out of this yet, Eli murmured, eyes fixed on the navigation panel. That attack wasn't random. Someone knows you're alive, and they're after you. Arya turned her gaze towards him, her eyes a stormy mix of confusion and fear. But why? I don't understand who I am, let alone why anyone would want to harm me. Eli sighed, toggling a switch to set their course automatically. He swiveled his chair to face her. I wish I had the answers for you, Arya. But right now, we need to focus on staying a step ahead of whoever is chasing us. The radar beeped suddenly, interrupting their conversation. Eli spun back, scanning the display. Looks like we've got a bigger problem now. A cruiser just entered the sector, and it's on an intercept course. It's Commander Zahn's ship. He's a local warlord, notorious for his ruthlessness. Aria's expression hardened. What do we do? We hide, Eli answered. There's an asteroid field nearby. We can lose them there. He pushed the throttle forward, and the Nomad responded, accelerating towards the dense cluster of rocks and debris ahead. The ship shuddered as they entered the field, asteroids colliding against the hull with soft thuds, muted by the vacuum of space. Eli navigated through the maze of rocks with skill, but the cruiser was persistent, its advanced sensors designed to track through such natural obstacles. Hang on, Eli called out, as he executed a sharp turn to avoid a particularly large asteroid. Aria braced herself, watching the scanner as the cruiser gained on them. She closed her eyes, reaching out with her newfound abilities. The space around them seemed to pulse with energy, and she focused on bending it, cloaking their presence from the enemy sensors. The effect was immediate. On the radar, the Nomad signal flickered and then disappeared, masked by the asteroid field's natural interference enhanced by Aria's power. Eli glanced at the display, then at her. Did you just... I think I made us invisible to their scanners, Aria interrupted, her voice laced with uncertainty and wonder. Eli grinned, a mix of relief and admiration lighting up his face. You're full of surprises. Let's keep moving. They continued weaving through the asteroid field, the cruiser's searchlights sweeping past them, close but not close enough. After what felt like hours, the lights receded and the cruiser moved off, its sensors failing to pick up their trail. Once they were clear, Eli eased the ship out of the asteroid field and set a course for Halcyon. The adrenaline of the escape ebbed away, leaving them both with the fatigue of their ordeal. We should reach Halcyon in a few hours, Eli stated, adjusting their trajectory slightly. My friend, Dr. Marajin, she's the one who can help us. She's good with alien tech and, well, alien anything. Aria nodded, her mind clearly elsewhere. Eli, why are you helping me? You could have left me there on Thera and been on your way. Eli paused, considering her question. I guess I see something in you. Maybe it's your will to live, or just my gut telling me you're worth saving. Besides, he chuckled softly, life's more interesting with you in it. Aria smiled, a small but genuine gesture that warmed the cabin. Thank you, Eli, she said softly, her voice thick with emotion, for believing in me. As they made their way to Halcyon, the stars outside seemed less hostile, more like beacons guiding them forward. But the peace was a fragile veil, masking the dangers that surely lay ahead. Eli knew they were only just beginning to unravel the mystery of Aria, and he feared the answers might shake the very foundations of the galaxy. Halcyon was a hub of interstellar activity, a melting pot of cultures and species, but it was also a place where one could easily disappear into the shadows. This was why Eli chose to dock the Nomad at the less conspicuous outskirts of the station, amidst the tangle of lesser-used docking bays and repair shops. As they stepped onto the station, the hum of energy and the clash of alien dialects filled the air, a stark contrast to the silence of space. Aria stayed close to Eli, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and apprehension at the bustling scene around them. We need to be careful here, Eli whispered, guiding her through the crowd. Eyes might be watching. Let's get to Mara quickly. They made their way through narrow alleys lined with neon signs and holographic ads, each corner bringing them deeper into the station's underbelly. Eventually, they arrived at a nondescript door marked only by a faded sign. Dr. Marajin, Xenobiology and Tech. Eli knocked, a rhythmic pattern that seemed to carry a coded message. After a moment, the door slid open, revealing a middle-aged woman with streaks of gray in her tightly pulled back hair. Her expression brightened upon seeing Eli. Eli, by the stars, it's good to see you, Mara exclaimed, stepping aside to let them in. Her lab was a chaotic mix of technology and alien artifacts, each piece seemingly holding a story. Mara, we need your help. Eli began, but Arya caught Mara's attention immediately. "Who is this?" Mara asked, her gaze fixed on Arya with a mix of curiosity and professional intrigue. "This is Arya. She's special," Eli replied, glancing at Arya, who looked uncomfortable under Mara's scrutinizing eyes. Mara nodded, sensing the seriousness of the situation. "Come into the lab. Let's see what we're dealing with." They followed Mara into a room filled with advanced diagnostic tools and monitors. Arya sat down in a chair resembling a medical scanner, which hummed to life at Mara's touch. "Let's start with a basic scan to figure out your physiology. Don't worry, it's completely safe," Mara assured Arya, who nodded hesitantly. As the scan progressed, Mara's monitors flickered with data, her eyes scanning the information rapidly. "Incredible," she muttered. "Her cellular structure is unlike anything I've encountered. There are energy signatures here that are off the charts." Eli watched, concern etched on his face. "Can you tell where she's from? Or why she's being hunted?" Mara shook her head. "Not yet, but I think I can enhance her memory recall. It might be risky, though." Arya looked between Eli and Mara, then settled her gaze on Mara. "Do it. I need to know who I am, why I matter." Mara nodded and adjusted the machine. "Okay, hold still, Arya. This might feel a bit strange." A moment later, Arya's eyes fluttered closed and her body tensed. Images and sounds bombarded her mind, fragments of memories playing at high speed. She saw flashes of distant planets, heard whispers of conversations in languages she didn't understand, and felt powerful emotions: fear, anger, hope. Then, as quickly as it had begun, the flood of images slowed, and one memory solidified. A meeting with several hooded figures, their faces obscured, speaking of a prophecy and a plan to harness her powers. Arya gasped, her eyes snapping open. "I remember. They were afraid of me. They said I could change the balance of power in the galaxy." Mara switched off the machine, her face grave. "That explains why you're being hunted. Your powers." Suddenly, the lab security alarm blared. Eli rushed to the monitor. "We've got company. Looks like Zahn's forces found us." Mara stood, her demeanor shifting to one of determination. "This lab has a back exit. You two need to leave now." Eli helped Arya to her feet. "What about you?" "I'll cover your escape." "Go!" With Mara's guidance, they navigated through a series of hidden passages leading out of the lab. Behind them, the sound of blaster fire and shouting echoed. Arya's memory of the prophecy echoed in her mind, a weighty reminder of the role she was yet to understand fully. As they emerged into the dim light of Vespera's streets, Eli took a deep breath. "We need to find allies," he said, "and we need to find them fast." After escaping from Mara's lab, Eli and Arya made their way to the outskirts of Vespera. Neo Eden, one of Commander Zahn's strategic bases, was their next target, a daunting fortress reputed for its impregnable defenses. It was here that they hoped to find more about Zahn's plans and possibly a way to leverage Arya's abilities against him. "We need to be smart about this," Eli said as they surveyed the base from a nearby ridge. "Neo Eden is heavily guarded, and Zahn will definitely have his best forces there." Arya nodded, her eyes scanning the horizon. "There might be a way to use my abilities to our advantage. If I can manipulate energy, perhaps I can disrupt their power systems, create an opening for us." "That's a start," Eli replied. "Let's try to get closer and see what we're up against." They moved stealthily, using the rugged terrain as cover. As they approached, the sheer scale of Neo Eden became apparent. Towering walls topped with surveillance equipment, patrolling drones, and the constant movement of troops made a direct assault seemingly impossible. Using a compact binoculars, Eli observed the guard rotations and noted the energy conduits leading into the base. "See those conduits? If you can disrupt those, it might shut down their defenses long enough for us to get inside." Arya focused, extending her senses towards the conduits. She felt the flow of energy pulsing through them, a rhythm that beat like a heart. Closing her eyes, she reached out, her mind weaving through the complex network of power. Suddenly, the conduits glowed briefly, then sparked as the energy flow stuttered. Inside Neo-Eden, alarms blared and lights flickered. "It's working," Eli whispered, grabbing Arya's arm. "Let's move." They dashed forward, using the confusion to slip past the outer defenses. Once inside, they hid behind a storage building, catching their breath. "We need to find the control center," Eli said. "That's where we'll find what Zahn is up to, navigating the base's corridors." They avoided patrols and made their way to the central hub. The control center was less guarded than expected, the soldiers distracted by the ongoing power issues. Eli and Arya entered the control room, quickly subduing the few technicians inside. Eli hurried to the main console, accessing the database. "Here," he said, pulling up a series of documents. "Plans for an invasion, using a force of enhanced soldiers. And it looks like they were planning to use your abilities to power them, Arya." Arya's face hardened. "Then we stopped them. No one should wield that kind of power." As they downloaded the data, the power stabilized, and the sound of approaching soldiers grew louder. "Time to go," Eli said, and they prepared to fight their way out. Arya had another idea. "Let me try something." She stood at the doorway, hands outstretched, her concentration palpable. As the first soldiers rounded the corner, she pushed her hands forward, and a wave of force emanated from her, knocking the soldiers back gently but firmly, rendering them unconscious. "Non-lethal. I can control it to be non-lethal," she said, amazed at her own growing control. They made their way out of the base, encountering minimal resistance thanks to Arya's abilities. Once clear, they looked back at Neo-Eden, its lights flickering in the distance. "We've got what we need to expose Zahn and stop his plans," Eli said, clasping Arya's shoulder. "You were incredible back there." Arya smiled, a mix of relief and determination in her eyes. "We're just getting started, Eli. Now that I know what I can do, I want to ensure no one else becomes a victim like I was." With the data secured and a new purpose, Eli and Arya set out to rally their allies, prepared to bring the fight directly to Zahn. The battle at Neo-Eden was just the beginning, and they were ready for whatever challenges awaited. The journey to the rebel outpost was tense. Eli and Arya had escaped Neo-Eden with critical information, but now they needed to act. They arrived at a hidden asteroid base, where a loose alliance of freedom fighters, outcasts, and ex-military officers opposing Commander Zahn had gathered. As they entered the bustling command center, a holographic map of the galaxy dominated the room, displaying strategic points under Zahn's control. The rebels turned to the newcomers, their wary eyes assessing them. Eli raised his hands in a gesture of peace. "We're here to help," he announced. "We've got intel on Zahn's next move and how he plans to use enhanced soldiers powered by Arya's abilities." Murmurs rippled through the crowd as the rebel leader, a tall woman with a cybernetic arm named Captain Ressa, stepped forward. Her piercing gaze locked onto Arya. "You're the one he's after," Ressa said, her tone both curious and skeptical. "What makes you so valuable?" Arya took a deep breath and stepped closer to the group. "I don't remember everything, but I know my abilities can manipulate energy, shields, weapons, even people's life forces. Zahn wants to use me to create an army of unstoppable soldiers. If we don't stop him, he'll conquer the galaxy." Ressa studied her for a long moment before nodding. "If you're telling the truth, then we have a chance. Zahn's fleet is already massing near the Eos Nebula. If we hit him there, we might be able to cripple his forces and end this war." Eli stepped in. "We're not just here to give you information. We'll fight alongside you. Arya's abilities can turn the tide." The rebels sprang into action, preparing for what would be their largest assault yet. Ships were armed, plans were drawn, and alliances solidified. Despite the tension, there was a spark of hope among them. When the fleet emerged near the Eos Nebula, the scale of the task ahead became clear. Zahn's armada stretched across the void, an imposing wall of firepower. At the center was his flagship, an enormous vessel bristling with weapons and surrounded by squadrons of fighter drones. Eli piloted the Nomad, with Arya seated beside him, her hands glowing faintly as she prepared to unleash her abilities. The rebel fleet moved into formation, their patchwork of ships small compared to Zahn's forces but determined. As the battle began, chaos erupted. Lasers and missiles streaked through the void, and explosions flared like supernovas. Arya closed her eyes, focusing on the energy fields around her. She extended her hands, amplifying the shields of the nearby ships and deflecting incoming attacks. "I've got their attention," she said, her voice strained but steady. "I can feel their weapons locking onto us." Eli maneuvered the Nomad through the chaos, dodging enemy fire while returning volleys of his own. "Keep it up, Arya. We're getting closer to the flagship." Meanwhile, the rebel fleet pushed forward, their smaller, faster ships weaving between Zahn's forces. Captain Ressa's voice crackled over the comms. "Eli, we're relying on you to take out their central command. If we can disable the flagship, the rest will fall apart." Arya nodded, her resolve hardening. "Get me close enough, and I'll do the rest." As the Nomad closed in on the flagship, Zahn's forces intensified their fire. The ship shook violently as a missile grazed its hull. Arya gritted her teeth, pouring her energy into stabilizing the shields. "I can't hold this much longer." Eli pushed the engines to their limit, breaking through the defensive line and bringing them alongside the flagship. "This is it," he said, guiding the ship into a docking bay. Inside the flagship, corridors were swarming with Zahn's elite troops. Eli and Arya fought their way through, Eli relying on his blaster and combat training, while Arya used her powers to disarm and incapacitate enemies without killing them. They reached the command center, where Commander Zahn waited. He was an imposing figure, clad in dark armor and flanked by heavily armed guards. His voice was cold and mocking. "You've brought her to me. How convenient." Arya stepped forward, her glow intensifying. "You won't use me for your plans, Zahn. This ends here." Zahn smirked. "Do you even know what you are, girl? The power you wield isn't just yours. It belongs to the collective. Surrender now, and I might let you live." Arya ignored his words, focusing her energy. The room filled with a blinding light as she unleashed a surge that knocked Zahn's guards unconscious. Zahn, however, stood firm, protected by a shimmering shield. "You'll have to do better than that," he said, raising a weapon designed to neutralize energy-based beings like her. He fired, and Arya screamed as the blast struck her. Eli, fueled by desperation, charged Zahn. Using a device he had scavenged earlier, he disrupted the shield, giving Arya a moment to recover. She rose, her glow now brighter than ever. "This ends now," she said, her voice reverberating with power. She unleashed a final burst of energy, overwhelming Zahn and shutting down the flagship systems. The ship trembled as explosions rippled through it. "Time to go," Eli shouted, pulling Arya towards the docking bay. They boarded the Nomad just as the flagship began to disintegrate,